Let's go in search of the origins of Halloween. When the harvest ends and winter looms with the overlap of Christian, folk, and pagan beliefs. Let's learn more about the fascinating history of Halloween with Dan Snow's History Hit.
On Midsummer Eve, when the bonfires are lighted on every hill in honour of St. John, the fairies are at their gayest and sometimes steal away beautiful mortals to be their brides. But on November Eve, Samhain, or Halloween, the fairies are at their gloomiest, for, according to the old Gaelic reckoning, this is the first night of winter. The night the fairies of the other world dance with the ghosts, the puka is abroad and witches make their spells. It's a dark night, and there's a chill in the air. The breeze moves through the dank woodland in the old west of Ireland. Through the trees, there is an opening. Figures gathered around two huge bonfires. They're celebrating the end of harvest time. This was a grueling few weeks of collecting all of the produce they've grown throughout the year. They're marking the end of the lighter months, welcoming with some trepidation the darkness to come, and the threats of illness and starvation, or even death, that comes with it. It's at this time of year, so they believe, the division between this world and the other world is at its thinnest. The spirits of the deceased can move back and forth over the divide. Now they are ready to greet and welcome their dead ancestors. Some wear costumes so they can disguise themselves from harmful spirits. This is the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, and this is where Halloween began.
Halloween in North America, it is a big deal. But the ironic thing is that the roots of Halloween are not in America. They're right here, in this little old archipelago of ours, in particular, the island of Ireland. And those roots stretch back thousands of years. Many of the traditions that we associate with American Halloween now are very Irish. And let's start with
the origin of the pumpkin. We have been gifted with turnips. The reason is this is the origin of the pumpkin. I don't mean in terms of biological origin, I mean in terms of folklorish origin. We would have these in Ireland, think bigger, they're kind of like the size of an actual pumpkin. We'd cut the top off, scoop out the insides, put some kind of a face on the outside, and then light a candle inside. And this was to ward off evil spirits. We did this even when we were kids, when I was a kid. So this was in the 80s and 90s as well. So there's a really, really long tradition.
And so that's before pumpkin carving was a thing in the States. Many of your cherished Halloween traditions are not, in fact, American. The food traditions of Halloween, the Irish call Samhain, and how gift-giving, mischief-making, going door to door stretch back thousands of years.
At Halloween in Ireland, at Samhain, there is not just a veil that separates the living world from the dead world, but actually two other worlds.
What do people believe happens at Samhain?
For Irish people celebrating Halloween or Samhain, it's possibly one of the most anticipated festivals in Ireland after Christmas. And it's anticipated, I suppose, because lots of us have memories of activities when we were children. And a lot of those centred around not just food, but also games and merriment and mischief and so on. In more recent times, that has been colonised by a more commercial aspect to things, which have changed practice. But that's the dynamic of culture, if you like.
Where does Samhain come from? How far back should we look for its genesis?
Samhain is the Irish word for the month of November. But also, Samhain is the name that was given to one of the quarter festivals that is associated with the Celtic year. So the Celtic year had two big festivals. One of them was Samhain, which is the end of October, the 31st of October, into the 1st of November. And the other one was Bealtaine, which is the end of April, the 1st of May. And then you have two minor festivals dividing those two halves of the year. We hear about these Celtic festivals from a lot of the Roman writers because the Romans would have come in contact with what you might call a Celtic culture or a Celtic civilization, a Celtic way of life. But it's also mentioned to some extent in the literature that comes out of Ireland in the early medieval period, the later medieval period. And for us in Ireland, those dates are around the 5th to the 12th centuries and a bit beyond. But then what happens in Ireland is that you also get descriptions and references to the festivities around this time of the year from a lot of the antiquarian writers, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Tell me more about some of those folkloric accounts in the 19th century. What do they describe happening?
What they describe happening is a kind of a mixture of all of that past. So it's all sorts of intersections between memory and legacy and trying to go back to the past and taking from the past to create a sense of this festival. In Ireland, a lot of that would have been associated in the late 19th century with this idea of Celtic revival, which was connected to a cultural revival that was linked to an Irish identity. So essentially what it is a mix of fun and games with some connection to the idea that this festival, which spans between the sun going down on the 31st of October and the sun going down on the 1st of November, this 24-hour period between dusk and dusk, there's some sort of folk idea there that it's not just associated with fun and feasting, but there's also some connection to another cosmos, to the other world. And for Irish people, that other world would be concentrated not of cultural complexity, it's connected to religious belief and folk belief.
Now, perhaps the food is less contested than some of the theology. Tell me about the famous food traditions.
Food is really interesting at Halloween because it plays several different roles. So the first thing is that you do try to have a special festive collection of foods for the celebrations. You have the overlap between Christian belief and folk belief. The following day is All Saints' Day. It's a holy day. So in Catholic observance, the day before Holy Days is observed as a non-meat eating day. So the first point is that the food and the dishes associated with Halloween are non-meat. So they're all vegetable, plant-based in a sort of a contemporary way of talking about it. So in Irish custom, the two big things associated with Halloween are the non-meat dish of Kilcannon. So that's sort of the savoury dish. And then the sweeter dish of the Halloween bread, which is a barmbrack. And the Kilcannon is mashed potatoes that's mixed in with a cooked brassica, a cooked member of the cabbage family, and that can be cabbage or kale, curly kale, different types of kale, or just simply cabbage in various different forms. So you cook the cabbage first, you make mashed potatoes, and you mix the two of them together. So that's the Halloween dish, Kilcannon. And then the sweet dish is the barmbrack. The barmbrack is either a yeast-leavened bread, barmbrack, or else it can also be interpreted as a sweet and enriched soda bread, which is made with bicarbonate of soda rather than a yeast levelling agent. So they're essentially the two big dishes for Halloween in Ireland.
As well as being delicious, how do they reflect what's going on generally?
These are special foods. If you think about Kilcannon, what it has, and particularly if you think about a rural economy in Ireland, and also maybe for people who were less well off, the Kilcannon is made distinctive not just by the base ingredients but also by the addition of liberal quantities of melted butter, because that melts into the mashed potatoes and makes it really good. And of course fat has all the flavour, and so fat is making this dish special. The sugar and the fruit additions to the soda bread or the barmbrack, if you're buying it, makes it special as well, that sweetness element. So there's a specialness in terms of the ingredients, but there's also a specialness in terms of the functions of these two dishes at Halloween. So they're not just to enjoy in a sensual way, because they taste really good, but also they function for different purposes at Halloween. And the two big functions of Kilcannon and barmbrack is for divination, divining the future. So you can tell the future with these two dishes, and you can tell the future specifically by reading the charms that you find that are incorporated into the Kilcannon or the barmbrack. So for the Kilcannon, for example, one of the practices was to put into it or hide in it a gold ring or a wedding ring. So that was the easy one. Everybody would get a bowl of Kilcannon, and part of the fun was to see who would get the gold ring in their Kilcannon, obviously without having any accident of choking. So if you got the ring, it meant that you would be married within the year. So that's all very pleasant. That's for divining the future. But then when it came to the barmbrack, This was a bit more complicated because there was a whole variety of charms that were baked into the bread. So you did have the ring, but you also had things like a pea, a bean, a rag, a stick, and each of these charms signify different things. So the ring in the barmbrack could either be like it was in the Kilcannon, it could be that you would marry within the year, but also these charms had fluidity in how you could interpret them. So the ring could also mean that you would live the longest, or you would be the first to die. The pea meant poverty, if you got that, and the bean would mean riches, or it could also mean that you would cross water, that you would emigrate. The thimble, if that was baked into the bread, could mean that you would either be a tailor or a dressmaker, or else you could be a spinster. And if finding them and divining the future, each of them connects to the society of the time and what was important for the society of the time. Women getting married, having a good profession, the fear of being poor, joining the church, being a priest or a nun, the religious orders, or emigration. And if you think about Ireland in the 19th and 20th centuries, these are all social facts that have consequence and meaning for people's lives. Good marriages, death.
Heading across the seas.